This is a podcast by the Straits Times.
So let's do a little bit of an experiment here. So we are a few people in this room, right? Can we all close our eyes for 10 seconds? We close our eyes and now think about a beautiful, beautiful moment that you had in nature. Something extraordinarily beautiful that you really enjoyed.
We are thinking.
Okay, and I see a lot of smiles here in the room, which makes me think that whatever it is that you just thought about, it was something beautiful, right? And now think about you would never be able to enjoy this again. There's something that we truly love. For example, a beautiful moment in nature. For example, I'm recharging my batteries with family and friends, walking through Bukatima or whatever it might be. I love it. It's really beautiful. It enhances my life, right? And I might lose this forever. This is why we should care.
Hi, I'm Suen Tan, and you're listening to Headstart on Record. It's too hot these days. Everybody says, OMG, it's climate change. But what can I do and why should I care? In the studio with me is Helge Muenkel. He's Chief Sustainability Officer of DBS, and he's going to talk about why our efforts matter in saving the world. Hi Helge, welcome to the show. Did you cycle here today or how do you get to work usually?
So I normally either cycle or run to work, and if I don't do either of them, then I take an MRT. And it's actually very beautiful to ride a bicycle or run because I live in the East, so very close to East Coast Park. And it's insanely beautiful just to cycle or run along the water. So it's very calming and I like it very much.
But how long does the run and cycling take you?
So I do it very slowly. So it's 10K. So when I cycle, it's maybe about half an hour. If I run, maybe a bit less than an hour, thereabouts.
Wow. So how much of that actually saves like emissions compared to if you took a Grab or if you drove?
Okay, I haven't calculated that precisely, but obviously quite a lot. So if we all were to walk or cycle a bit more or take public transport, we're definitely going to save quite a lot. I can't give you a scientific answer on the tons of carbon, but it's quite material. But I actually also do it because I genuinely enjoy cycling or running in East Coast Park.
Right, so it's not like you are forcing yourself to do it and you're like, oh, I'm the DBS CSO, so I have to do this.
Forcing is definitely not the right word. So I do it because I think it's good, but I also do it because I enjoy it.
Okay, yeah. So which other aspects of your life would you say are green in that sense?
Yeah, so we do quite a lot as a family, actually. So I have 3 kids, so it's quite difficult sometimes to get them from one place to the next. So only cycling, running and taking MRT is a bit tricky. So we do have a car, but it's an EV. And we have a 100% solar plan at home. So the electricity we get out of the plugs comes from renewable energy. That's from our utility provider. So these are 2 important things. Then I decided quite a few years ago, before I got this role, actually quite a long time ago, to become a vegetarian. So the food we eat has quite a huge impact on a number of things as well. And I don't think that the world has to become vegan in order to accomplish our sustainability goals. But for example, eating less beef is definitely positive, for example, for climate. So I became a vegetarian, which is not a big problem anymore because there is a lot of yummy food that you can actually get in Singapore and beyond.
Right, okay. Well, what age were you at when you decided, oh, I really care about this? This is a problem and I want to do something about it.
So when you say care about it, then we probably need to define a little bit what it means. So I was actually probably a teenager when I started becoming quite fascinated by sustainability more broadly. So back then there was this famous book, Limits to Growth, which was sponsored by the Club of Rome. You might not remember or may not have heard about it, but it was the first time that there was a big publication which told us the way we live, play and work on planet doesn't really quite work. And if we continue doing this, we're going to cause quite a lot of damage. So that was the first time I was really interested. And then when I did my master's, I did a master's in developing economics. So it was all about fostering socio-economic growth what was back then coined developing or transformational countries. So it was not necessarily focused on climate or specific environmental matters, but more broadly socioeconomic growth, lifting people out of poverty. So that's why I asked you, what do you mean by it? So sustainability has been a topic for a very long time for me. Climate and environmental matters, maybe over the last, 10, 15 years.
Right. But how do you get to this position then as like the Chief Sustainability Officer of DBS? Do you have to jump through many hoops, or was it like your whole career something that was in sustainability?
So the first point is that there was no straight line between I finish university and I become the CSO of DBS.
Yes.
It was a long and winding road. And as a matter of fact, loads of failures in between. So when I had finished my master's, I, for example, wanted to work in the field. I wanted to work in countries that I thought might need help for socioeconomic growth and so on and so forth. And I utterly failed. Nobody wanted me. They wanted people that are engineers, or they wanted people that are teachers. They wanted people that can do something practically to really directly have an impact. They didn't want an economist, as I was. So I actually utterly failed. And then I first became a banker. Life happened and I became a banker. And I was fortunate enough that about, roughly 15 years ago or so, I joined a bank which, like my current employer, was very focused on sustainability. So it allowed me actually to move back into what I had always been quite fascinated by and interested in, and work in the field of sustainability. So yes, jumped through many hoops, long and winding road, and failures in between.
Right. And if I were to say I want a career in sustainability now, what are some of the skills that I need to have? Or like, if I'm in university, what kind of courses do I need to take?
Yeah, that's an interesting question, which I get quite often. And I don't think there is one source of truth, one path that you have to take. In fact, the way sustainability develops now, it's really integrated into everything we do. You can do a mechanical engineering degree and build sustainability into it. You can do a teaching degree and build sustainability into it. You can do a business degree and build sustainability into it. So there is not this one course or this one degree that you have to take. You can actually integrate it into everything. So I think you should first identify, what do you really love? What are you really good at? What do you really want to give it a shot? And I'm pretty sure whatever that is, sustainability will actually be an integral part of it. So I think at the beginning of your career, you should just be open to many, many different things, read a lot of different stuff, try to get experiences all over the place, think and act laterally, as opposed to believing there's this one path that leads you into sustainability.
Do you think that in the future, every single job role will have some form of sustainability in it? Like, you need to at least have some knowledge or some, I wouldn't say expertise, right? Because there are certain roles that require more expertise than others, but do you at least need some sustainability knowledge?
Yeah, I believe so, big picture, right? So of course, all the jobs are a little bit different, but let me tell you this one story which I so love. So John F. Kennedy, back then US president in the 60s, he walked through the NASA building and he passed by a janitor. And he asked the janitor, "Hey, I'm John F. Kennedy, who are you and what are you doing here?" And the janitor said, "Well, I help people fly to moon." And that is a little bit the spirit. It doesn't actually quite matter what it is exactly that you do. For example, also at DBS, everybody can actually support the sustainability strategies and plans that we have in your respective roles. And as a consequence, I think sustainability will really be integrated into what we do.
And I guess having said all that, you as holding the role of the CSO, what is it that you do in your day-to-day work?
Yeah, so it is a lot about creating a strategy for the bank on what we actually want to do in sustainability. And one of the core jobs at the beginning is actually filtering. There are so many things that are happening globally and in Singapore. And you try to really filter this down to understand what the key trends are, what is relevant to ourselves as a bank, what's relevant to us. So filtering all the stuff that's happening out there in the world is quite important. Then you distill this and try to engage with many, many other partners in the bank to discuss, okay, what do we now make out of this? How can we become more sustainable? And of course, you always need to lean this back to the core of what we do. We are a bank. one of the core things we do is to provide lending and financing and advice in relation to lending and financing. So how can we integrate sustainability into the core of what we do to empower our customers, whether it's a retail customer or a private banking customer or an SME customer or a large corporate? How do we empower them to being more sustainable? That's really the gist of the matter.
Right. We hear the word sustainable finance all the time, right? So, I mean, to the person on the street, what is sustainable finance and what role do they play in that?
So let's take the example of a company that we have been banking for a long time, and let's assume this company does certain things that are very valuable to their customers, but at the moment it's very dirty. And they know it's very dirty and they want to change. They want to change the core of their business and the way they go about producing products and services for their customers. So they will probably need to do some investments in order to change the way they go about their everyday business. And then they could come to us and we strategize on what can you actually do. And we are then supporting that from a financing point of view. So consider sustainable finance as an instrument that wants to empower customers to being more sustainable.
Yeah, like let's say I'm 25, right? And I don't have a lot of money, but I do want to invest to help the planet be greener, just in the broader sense. What can I do? Like what sort of products or things that I can buy into?
Yeah, first, of course, you need to really ask yourself very strategically. So before I go into sustainable investing, you need to ask yourself a little bit what you generally want to accomplish. So sustainability, again, is part and parcel of your overall strategy. So I don't think you should just look at sustainability, but you have many, many needs as a human being, right? So think about broader what actually your strategy is and how sustainability can be part and parcel of it. But fundamentally, there are actually many products that you could invest in, but you need to understand what the positive impact it is actually that you may create with these investments. And is it worth it? I mean, does it fit your overall strategy in terms of what you want to accomplish? So, for example, there are sometimes these broad-brushed ESG funds. They might not serve you very well because they're very broad. It's very difficult to understand what they actually invest in and how this creates positive impact in the world. Maybe you might be interested in specific climate action, or you're interested in creating positive impact on social matters, helping people to develop future-ready skills or health and education or whatever it is. So I think it all starts with asking yourself, what do you actually want to accomplish with your investments and how does sustainability feature in this? And then you can look at the various products that are out there.
Okay, yeah, because I think a couple of years ago when we were all talking about sustainability and people said, oh, you have to stop using plastic straws, you have to stop using plastic bags. So everybody switched to like metal straws, and then they complained that it's difficult to wash them, and then more products came up to wash your metal straws, and people started getting into tote bags and bought like 20 tote bags. I'm speaking about myself, of course. And so, having said all that, there also comes a point where it feels pointless, right? Like it's the big companies that are putting money that can change the way that the planet's going. And like me with my metal straws and my tote bags, does that change anything? Like what does it mean to the individual?
So the short answer is yes, it matters what you do. But the longer answer is that the sustainability challenges we face, and it's not only about climate, and I guess we're going to talk about this in a moment. There are many sustainability challenges, but they are so huge that no one can do it alone, but everybody has a certain accountability. If you think about our societies, there are different actors, right? There's governments and regulators, there are private sector entities, there are financial institutions, there's us, the community at large. And in the end of the day, unless we act together and everyone does something, we're not gonna get there. So it's of course sometimes maybe daunting to think, okay, one plastic straw, what is the difference that it makes? And I have certain views on that, by the way, but I just mentioned it because you stressed straws. Or I cycle once and then others fly, so why would it actually make any difference? But if you think about it, if many little things happen from many people and you aggregate that, it creates real impact. Yes, it still means that governments and regulators have to do something. Yes, it still means that private sector entities have to do something and banks have to do something and so on. But as individuals, we have a huge influence around, for example, what products and services are being delivered by private sector entities. So I would say, don't be too negative about your influence. As a matter of fact, every little thing matters, and if we aggregate it, it really can make a dent.
That's a very hopeful message, actually. Yeah, and I guess there's also the opposite extreme, right? There are the people who say the world's going to end anyway, so why should we care? Or things are already so bad, so, there's nothing that I can do. So to that, like, what would you say to the why should I care question?
Why should I care? So let's do a little bit of an experiment here. So we have a few people in this room, right? Can we all close our eyes for 10 seconds? We close our eyes. And now think about a beautiful, beautiful moment that you had in nature. Something extraordinarily beautiful that you really enjoyed.
We're thinking.
Okay. And I see a lot of smiles here in the room, which makes me think that whatever it is that you just thought about, it was something beautiful, right? And now think about you would never be able to enjoy this again. There's something that we truly love. For example, a beautiful moment in nature. For example, I'm recharging my batteries with family and friends, walking through Bukatima or whatever it might be. I love it. It's really beautiful. It enhances my life, right? And I might lose this forever. This is why we should care. Let me define sustainability. Sustainability to me means, number one, people live well. And number two, future generations will also live well. Now, let me explain this a little bit. Live well means we have food on the plate, we can breathe fresh air, we have access to fresh water, we have shelter. If we're ill, we're getting treated. And we enjoy beautiful things, like we enjoy a walk in nature. We are recharging our batteries. There's a lot of social value in that as well. So that means live well. And actually, as humans, we have done extraordinarily well on that. We have lifted hundreds of millions of people out of poverty. More people have access to education. Less babies die at birth. Less women die at birth. There are so many hard data points that tell us that we have actually done a lot of progress on the first of the two goals. But the second goal is this thing that we need to do this in a certain way that we don't cause damage to Mother Earth, such that future generations can also live well, right? This is the intergenerational fairness thing. And here we have not done that well. So we should all care because we are at risk of losing something that we love. We love living well. We love enjoying breathing fresh air and all those things. And I'm pretty sure if you think about it, most of us also really care that future generations live well. And that's why we should care, not to lose something that we love.
That's actually a beautiful answer. So, yeah, I guess sometimes it feels very doom and gloom, right? When we talk about climate change and sustainability, a lot of it is about the world's ending and all our efforts are not enough. Like, do you lie in bed at night and think, oh my gosh, what's going on with my job? Am I actually going to succeed?
So, is the world going to end tomorrow? No, but let's be a bit sober around the state of the world. So I mentioned to you that sustainability to me means people live well and future people also live well. And what that means, by the way, is it is not only about climate change. There are many, many facets. As a matter of fact, as the world, we once developed what we call United Nations Sustainability Development Goals. And there are 17. That's the ultimate North Star in sustainability. And they cut across environmental, social, and economic matters, right? So I just wanted to establish that again. It's really broader than just climate. And it is very true that as humans, we haven't really done well on the second part. So we're causing damage to Mother Earth, which might risk that future generations do not live well. Climate change ultimately means, as humans, we have changed the way we live, work, and play. And that triggers temperatures globally to go up. So the two most important things we have done is, number one, we burn stuff. We burn coal, oil, and gas to produce energy or to produce electricity, to produce heat. That helped us to make people live well. But this burning stuff has created loads of carbon emissions. And the second big thing that we did is we caused a lot of damage to nature. For example, we cut a lot of trees because we wanted to produce more food. There was population growth, we needed more food, so we cut down a lot of trees. And that's not good because trees are a natural carbon sink. So they would actually naturally take carbon out of the atmosphere. So the way we live, work, and play changed. and hence there's more and more carbon emissions in the atmosphere, and that almost locks temperatures here and means temperatures go up. Now, why do I care? What does it matter to me? What does 2.0 degree temperature rise mean? What does 1.5 mean? So let me again describe this by way of a story. So if you go to a doctor and you do a blood pressure test, and the doctor says pressure is 120 over 80, you would be really happy, right? That's a good outcome. If the pressure goes up, the doctor is not going to tell you, you're going to suffer a heart attack or you're going to suffer a stroke. The doctor will say, the risk of a heart attack or a stroke has risen. And that's what climate scientists are telling us in terms of climate change. The higher the temperatures are, the higher the risks are that there are really detrimental implications for human beings because there are more extreme weather events and so on and so forth. And that can have all sorts of direct implications, for example, heat stress, or it can impact food production and so on and so forth. Now, why is this 2 degrees so important? That goes back to this heart attack and stroke story I just told. What climate scientists are telling us is, if we limit global temperatures to well below 2 degrees, we are in a safer space to avoid catastrophic climate change. Now, are we on track to accomplish this well below 2? No, we're not. But the positive news is that we're making progress and that more and more actors like governments, regulators, private sector entities, financial institutions, us as human beings, we're all showing more efforts to actually address this. So we're slowly getting better, but we need to work even harder. We need to do so fast. And one thing I also want to say, I hear from many young people that they're very concerned about climate change and they don't want to have kids. And that's, of course, a very dramatic personal decision. And I can understand that the world is very complex. There's not only climate change, there are many other things that are going through my mind very often. So I acknowledge that. It's stressful. But the world will not go under tomorrow. And as a matter of fact, also not in 2 days. The implications of what we do now will also take quite a lot of time to actually become reality. And the positive news is it's in our hands. And as a matter of fact, we have all the solutions. So all we need is the willpower to do it.
So that's quite motivational, actually, the fact that we can still be saved in a way. But you know what worries you as like a CSO? Are there things that make you think, oh, this is something that we really have to make a greater push at, or things that you just worry about in general?
So what I worry about is we have 8 billion people on this planet. And I said to you before that there are many sustainability challenges to make sure people live well. And if we only had one sustainability challenge, only climate, I would be super convinced we're going to nail this in the not so distant future. But doing something on climate might have short-term implications on other sustainability development goals. We still need to lift people out of poverty. We still need to make sure they have food on the plate. We still need to ensure that people have access to electricity and so on and so forth. So what drives me or what makes me sometimes sleepless is the interconnections between these sustainability challenges. And you do something here and it has impact on something else. And that's really tricky. And at the moment, the world actually is in a very complex space, right? There are many things happening. There's Gen AI, there are geopolitics between the US and China. There are wars. There are many things happening. And we had a cost of living crisis. I mean, everybody in Singapore will I think, know what I'm talking about. So then you are in a situation where people maybe focus a little bit less on, for example, climate action or other things, because you first want to make sure you have food on the plate until the end of the month. So what we have seen over the last, I would say, 12 to 18 months is the world is so complex that actually in certain areas, people also have taken certain steps back and focused on other challenges as well. But net, I still see overall a positive momentum of more and more actors doing more and more. But I can't take that for granted. We need to keep pushing. We all need to work on explaining the why better. When you talk about climate change and net zero targets and all that, nobody can relate to that. It's too technical. It doesn't really have any implications on me as a person. But if you think about the risk of losing something that you love, that's maybe more relatable. So my point is, we need to make sure that there is broad support from the community at large for all the things we do. And I think that support will only be there if people emotionally connect to the why and understand why and then push.
So if you had like one thing to say to people, it would be think of what you will lose. Is it?
Well, that is one way of doing it. I would have another one, which is don't kill yourself about all the things that you don't do and kind of end up in a rabbit hole of negativity because there are many things we can do better. Try to change your life in small steps and then be proud of the small steps you have taken. I've become a vegetarian. The world will not become vegan, and you don't have to become vegan, but you can adjust your diet a little bit and make a positive impact. You can cycle a bit more. You can walk a little bit more. You can drive a car a little bit less. And there are other things that you can do, right? And try to do small changes and be proud of them, as opposed to being always focused on the negatives and what you don't do. So I think it's also important that we keep the spirit that we can actually change it, but I don't want to be superficial and kind of tell the story that it's definitely going to be awesome. No, we need to push a bit harder, but we can. We have all the solutions.
If we distill it down to 3 top things that you think, let's say a 25-year-old can do today, what are the 3 things?
So I would say, number 1, change the food you eat a little bit, but change your diet a little bit to become more sustainable. That's 1. Number 2, walk and cycle a bit more, right? These little things. If we all drive a little bit less, it means less demand for fossil fuels. And it's easy and simple things. By the way, I live in the East, as I told you. It's beautiful to walk and cycle in East Coast Park. So you don't always have to take a car. So that's another thing. The third thing is talk about it. Talk about people. Make them aware. Educate yourself, of course. I mean, you need to know the facts and the data. And you need to emotionally also connect. But talk about it. Talk to people about it. And ultimately, keep a bit of a positive spin. So there is, if you work on sustainability, you definitely have very dark days. I have dark days because all day long I read about certain things that are not necessarily very positive. The mere fact that sustainability jobs are well sought after right now is actually a bad thing, right? Because it means there are grave challenges in the world that need to be tackled. So I always recommend this book. It's written by a beautiful scientist called Dr. Hannah Ritchie. It's called Not the End of the World. She's really a wonderful scientist, and she summarizes very complex issues in a beautiful, succinct way, always extremely data-driven. And it's a book of hope. And her notion is, we will not be the last generation. We will not be. But we might be the first generation that truly lives sustainably. So whoever is out there and have doubts and is very negative, and I can fully understand the stress that many of the challenges cause, have a look at that book. I think it's a beautiful way of maybe having a slightly more constructive view on life.
That's very encouraging and comforting as well, without saying, okay, you can just sit back and do nothing. Yeah. Okay, that's a wrap for this episode of Headstart on Record. Thank you, Helge. It was a pleasure talking to you. I'm Suen Tan. You can email us your thoughts on this issue or suggest another question you'd like to see me tackle next time on the show. You can also reach out to me on LinkedIn. And if you'd like to read my articles and the Headstart newsletter, all these links are in our podcast show notes. This podcast episode is edited by Amirul Karim. Stay tuned then. Thanks for listening.
Send your feedback to podcast@sph.com.sg. Find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or within our Straits Times app. Thanks for listening. Do note, all analyses, opinions, recommendations, and other information in this podcast are for general information purposes only and are not intended to be relied upon as financial advice. You should not rely on them in making any decision. Please consult a fully qualified financial advisor or professional expert for independent advice and verification. To the fullest extent permitted by law, SPH Media shall not be liable for any loss arising from the use of or reliance on any analyses, opinions, recommendations, and other information in this podcast. SPH Media accepts no responsibility or liability whatsoever that may result or arise from the products, services, or information of any third parties. All opinions expressed by participants in this podcast are solely their own and do not reflect the opinions of SPH Media.